Hello, and welcome to Calm and Cozy Stories, a place where everyone can find calm and enchantment beneath the soft glow of the moon, right before drifting off to sleep. Tonight, we invite you on another journey through a captivating story, one that helps cultivate a sense of peace and relaxation. Before we begin, let's take a moment to gently prepare our bodies and minds for a soothing, restorative rest. Make yourself comfortable, and with each slow inhale and long exhale, allow the cares of the day to gradually slip away. It's not always simple to detach from the day's busyness, especially when bedtime approaches. But keep in mind, the less we worry about falling asleep, the easier it is for the mind to release tension. Let the steady rhythm of your breathing carry off any remaining worries, and let the story you're about to hear guide you into deep relaxation. Now, settle in and allow the moonlit atmosphere to softly embrace you. Enjoy this story, and may you drift into peaceful, restful slumber here on Calm and Cozy Stories. Years beyond memory, a resplendent city shimmered on the shores of a broad, meandering river, acclaimed as the jewel of the kingdom, for within its heart resided the royal lineage in a palace of breathtaking beauty. This very river, a lifeblood, carved a natural nexus for commerce. Its port pulsed with vessels arriving and departing, bearing wares that journeyed downstream to coastal towns and distant lands beyond the horizon. Such renown in trade, coupled with its strategic perch upon the waterway, imbued the city with vibrant prosperity and ceaseless energy. Merchants, diverse in their crafts, thrived, erecting elegant residences that flanked the river's expanse. Graceful bridges arched across the water, seeming almost to float, uniting the communities on opposing banks. Even artisans of humbler means found fortune in the city's robust pulse. Horses needed shoeing, tools required forging, and potions demanded mixing. The adage held true: a rising tide lifts all boats. And so it was for the favored inhabitants of this realm. The sovereign, King Valerius, possessed a genial and mirthful disposition, perhaps even bordering on the frivolous in the eyes of some. His daughter, the Princess Isolde, commanded widespread admiration. Hopeful aspirants from neighboring kingdoms converged upon the palace, bearing extravagant tokens, each vying for her hand. The throne room grew cluttered with cascades of jewels, fragrant soaps, ingenious clockwork music boxes, and chests brimming with exotic teas and spices. Suitor after suitor endeavored to eclipse the last, with offerings meant to convey devotion. Yet, these contenders faced a hurdle more formidable than mere rivalry. As fate decreed, alongside her luminous beauty and resolute spirit, the princess was endowed with a profound intellect. Consequently, matrimony was a state she approached with deliberation, not haste. As the sole inheritor of the throne, her life had been a tapestry woven with pursuits of her choosing: immersion in classical literature, mastery of languages, the study of history and music, Princess Isolde held elevated expectations for any who would presume to be her consort, and none among her suitors could sustain a conversation that matched her intellectual depth. One by one, they faced polite refusal. King Valerius, for his part, felt no urgency for her marriage. He was frequently too engrossed in the pleasures of life and the diversions of the court to raise objections. The king owned a splendid white steed, and among his cherished diversions were long excursions into the countryside. On one such day, whilst relishing a canter through the woodlands, his horse startled at the sudden appearance of a cunning fox. The loyal creature reared violently, unseating the king. Though largely unharmed, his foot became ensnared in the stirrup during the fall. Days of recuperation followed, with court healers applying countless poultices. Yet his foot never fully recovered its former ease. Walking, alas, was no longer a comfortable pursuit. A shadow fell over him at the thought that life's simple joys might be forever diminished. Some time thereafter, a suitor presented himself to the princess, bearing a gift of true wonder, a pair of slippers crafted from the softest silk, dyed the most delicate shade of rose. These slippers, the suitor avowed, would permit her to dance endlessly, without a hint of fatigue or pain touching her feet. Isolde regarded this assertion with skepticism. Yet, embracing a spirit of inquiry, she donned the slippers for a sumptuous ball, hosted by a city merchant the following evening. To her astonishment, the promise held true. She danced without pause at the glittering affair, through the night, and into the subsequent day, ceasing only when sheer exhaustion claimed her. Miraculously, her feet felt as untroubled during the final measure as they had at the very first. Intrigued by their origin, she questioned the suitor. He revealed they were acquired at great expense from a renowned itinerant cordwainer who had journeyed through his lands. An idea sparked within Isolde. Could such footwear be fashioned for her father? If the same mysterious craft could benefit the king's afflicted foot, perhaps, she mused, he might walk with joy once more. She dispatched one of the king's swiftest and most devoted servants to locate the elusive shoemaker, pledging immense reward if the artisan could deliver a miraculous solution. Weeks stretched into an anxious expanse, King Valerius remaining largely confined to his chambers. When the king's spirits flagged, a pall descended upon the city. Festivities ceased abruptly. Without their monarch orchestrating the customary celebrations, the entire populace found existence markedly less vibrant. At long last, the servant returned, the famed shoemaker in tow. A ripple of excitement surged through the court. Word spread that their guest carried with him a shoe, purported to alleviate the king's discomfort entirely, scheduled for presentation in the throne room the very next day. Naturally, the shoemaker was granted the palace's most luxurious guest suite. He settled into his chamber with an air of importance, instructing footmen to place a specific, richly carved wooden chest at the foot of his bed. All attention fixated on this chest, for everyone surmised it contained the king's promised magical shoe. Among the palace staff was a young man named Finian, tasked with tending the fireplaces and maintaining order within the rooms. Finian was a keen-eyed and quick-witted fellow, raised by his uncle, proprietor of a local bookshop. This upbringing had steeped him in reading, yet left him without fortune. Securing employment at the palace represented his most viable path to sustenance. Thus, he diligently cleaned, day after day, without murmur. Finian entered the celebrated shoemaker's chamber after the man had descended for the evening meal. He built up the fire, his gaze sweeping the room for any disarray. It landed upon the intricately carved wooden box. Like all others, he sensed its extraordinary contents and found himself unable to resist a fleeting glimpse. His fingers traced the beautiful carvings before he decided on a swift inspection. He lifted the heavy metal latch and peered inside. There, nestled upon purple velvet, lay a large slipper of white silk. He dared not touch it, fearing ash might mar its perfection. Never had he beheld footwear so exquisite. As he admired it, a sound echoed from the corridor, the shoemaker returning. Finian hastily closed the chest's lid and slipped beneath the bed, concealed by the hanging dust ruffle. The shoemaker entered, and Finian heard the distinct sound of items being placed upon a nearby table. Pressing his cheek to the cool floor, he could just discern the man setting out a small jar and a soft brush. The man then approached the wooden chest, unsettlingly close to Finian's hiding place, but remained oblivious to his presence. Instead, he retrieved the beautiful white slipper. Carrying it back to the table, he proceeded to lightly brush the slipper's interior with a powder from the jar, which shimmered momentarily in the firelight. He then tapped the brush thrice against the jar, resealed it, and stored away both implements and the shoe. His task complete, humming contentedly, the shoemaker donned a velvet cloak and departed the chamber once more. Certain the coast was clear, Finian emerged from beneath the bed. The table stood empty, the chest securely fastened. Wary of being discovered, Finian quit the room to resume his duties. Yet, as he worked, the image of the shoe and the mysterious glittering powder occupied his thoughts. What purpose did it serve? Finian was absent from the throne room the following day, during the grand presentation, but news traveled swiftly through the servant network. The shoe, gossip confirmed, was a triumph. The king's pain reportedly vanished the instant the slipper touched his foot, restoring his former cheer. Indeed, His Majesty was already strolling the gardens with members of the court, and plans for a lavish ball were underway. The shoemaker, handsomely compensated with gold, had departed to pursue commissions in faraway lands. A collective sigh of relief swept the city. Life would resume its familiar, joyous rhythm. King Valerius plunged back into life with gusto, soon dedicating his energies to organizing a magnificent regatta on the river for all citizens. The day was declared a holiday, promising games, races, and naturally, abundant feasting. A royal barge was prepared, large enough for dancing. where the king and his court would observe the boat races from the water. Speculation buzzed about who would earn the privilege of joining the royal party. The holiday dawned under sparkling sunshine. The river teemed with small boats, adorned with colorful pennants, its clear surface glittering as if strewn with jewels. Music and the aroma of delectable food filled the air. Aboard the barge, the king and his retinue reveled, dancing, eating, and laughing throughout the day. Then, the unforeseen occurred. Leaning over to converse with someone in a neighboring vessel, the king lost his footing, teetering precariously close to the barge's edge. Fortunately, helping hands were plentiful, but by the time he stood safely upright once more, his cherished white slipper was gone. It struck the water, bobbed for a fleeting moment, and then sank from sight. A cry arose. All capable swimmers should dive in pursuit. Occupants of nearby boats leaned over, trailing hands through the water. Many plunged directly into the river, searching frantically. Ultimately, the slipper remained lost. Almost immediately, the king complained of returning discomfort, unable to bear weight on his foot. He was carried home, utterly disconsolate. In the ensuing days, the river became a hive of activity. The king promised a substantial reward to anyone retrieving the shoe. News spread rapidly to adjacent kingdoms, attracting fortune hunters eager to claim the prize. They scoured the waters, combed the banks, sifted through mud, and cast nets, all to no avail. Isolde observed their repeated failures, witnessing her father sink deeper into hopelessness with each passing day. One morning, her resolve solidified. She announced that, in addition to her father's reward, she would bestow her hand in marriage upon whoever succeeded in this daunting quest. Unlike her father, Isolde harbored little expectation of the shoe's recovery. The river was deep and had claimed far greater treasures. Her secret hope, however, lay in attracting someone possessed of ingenuity, someone capable of devising a novel solution to her father's affliction, someone she could respect, perhaps even love. Like every soul in the kingdom, Finian heard Isolde's declaration. Though merely a servant, he was utterly captivated by the princess, finding her dazzling in both wit and appearance. Finian recalled a shelf dedicated to science and alchemy within his uncle's bookshop. He had pored over those volumes in his youth, captivated by the mysteries they unveiled. While ignorant of enchanted shoes, the memory of the shoemaker secretly dusting the king's slipper with powder remained vivid. Logic dictated that the powder, not the slipper itself, was the source of the pain relief. Finian resolved to seek the origin of the powdered remedy, rather than squander time searching for the lost footwear. His pursuit became tireless. While the river thronged with fortune seekers diving and dredging, Finian dedicated his scant free hours to his uncle's bookshop, a wondrous haven piled high with tomes of every description: cookbooks, worn historical accounts, classical texts in myriad languages.
Novels and storybooks lay in charming disarray, alongside collections of poetry. Here and there, a cozy, worn armchair, nestled in a quiet corner, invited hours of immersive reading.
Finian haunted the nooks and crannies of his uncle's modest shop. When duties called him away, he borrowed books on alchemy, carrying them back to the palace to devour in stolen moments. One day, buried within a dusty herbalism text, he found his answer. It spoke of a plant flourishing in a specific locale upon the plains of a nearby kingdom. Its pollen possessed pain-curing properties, but required harvesting by moonlight and resisted dilution or dissolution. It must be applied in its powdered state. Consulting available maps, Finian calculated the journey would demand roughly a week on horseback. Yet, he owned no horse, nor did his uncle. Any acquaintance fortunate enough to possess one could scarcely spare it for weeks on end. Finian understood that reaching this miraculous plant was his sole prospect for resolving the king's plight, and just possibly winning Isolde's hand. Risking everything, he determined to address the king directly at the next public audience. Later that week, he joined the queue of citizens awaiting their turn outside the king's chambers. These audiences were invariably protracted and taxing, often fraying the king's temper as the day wore on. Unfortunately for Finian, he stood near the end of the line. After many hours, with only a few petitioners remaining, Finian finally stood before the king, who gestured impatiently for him to speak. "Your Highness," Finian began, "I believe I may have found a way to cure your ailment, but I shall require the loan of a horse." Courtiers gasped at this audacious display. The notion of a servant boy requesting a royal steed, let alone claiming he could cure the king, was preposterous. Realizing his time was fleeting, Finian pressed on. "There is a flower," he stated, "that grows in a particular place. I know its location, but reaching it on foot would take a month. If your Highness could lend me a horse, I could return within 2 weeks to relieve your suffering." The nobles murmured, some stifling laughter. The king shifted upon his throne, and Finian braced for dismissal. But the young man was met with astonishment. To the amazement of everyone present, the king declared, "Give this boy a horse and send him on his way. If he can succeed where all of you have failed, the gamble is worthwhile." Then, with a dramatic flourish, he dismissed Finian and commanded the remaining audience members to depart as well. Princess Isolde, seated nearby throughout this extraordinary exchange, was deeply intrigued. That this young man possessed the acumen to pursue a novel approach earned her immediate respect. She admired cleverness, and his courage in presenting such a bold petition before the king was commendable. Though hesitant to nurture false hope, the princess secretly wished Finian might indeed achieve a miraculous cure. Meanwhile, Finian hurried to prepare. News of his audience spread like wildfire. Soon, every servant in the palace whispered about it. His colleagues rallied around him as he readied himself. The cook packed generous provisions. The grooms offered one of the finest horses. All eyes now rested upon Finian. He embarked the following day, carrying his food, water, the herbalism book, and a map from his uncle. The older man held immense faith in his nephew, hoping Finian's diligence and bravery would lead him to success. Before long, Finian had journeyed farther beyond the city limits than ever before. He crossed the tranquil river, traversed the dense forest, and eventually navigated a windswept mountain pass onto the grassy plains beyond. Finian rode for long stretches, pausing only for necessary rest. When at last vast expanses of waving wildflowers unfolded before him, he knew he had arrived. Retrieving the precious herbalism text from his saddlebag, he let his horse graze and began slowly surveying the area, comparing the flora to the book's illustration. It consumed the better part of the day. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, he discovered a large cluster of white flowers, matching the description precisely. His treasure was found. Taking sustenance from his pack, he settled in the grass, contentedly eating his evening meal while awaiting nightfall. According to the text, darkness would coax the flowers open, revealing their precious gift. He drifted into slumber as the sunset painted the sky in fiery reds and oranges. The hoot of an owl roused him some time later. He sat up in the cool darkness, rubbing sleep from his eyes. There, luminous in the moonlight, stretched a sea of open blooms. Taking his jar, as instructed, he lightly tapped each open flower, gently shaking the glittering pollen into the container. He repeated this task with patience, moving methodically from cluster to cluster until the jar was full. He carefully secured the cap and placed the jar safely in his saddlebag. As dawn broke, Finian was already hastening homeward. Yet, a question lingered. What if the powder failed? He knew everything hinged on his faith in this cure. Back through the windswept pass he rode, back through the dense forest. Within approximately a week, he approached the familiar skyline of his home city. He crossed the soaring bridge with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. Excitement rippled through the staff as he returned his dependable horse to the stable yard. Servants gathered, eager for news. Had he found it? What was the journey like? Would the cure work? Finian responded politely, but deferred answers, withdrawing the precious jar and tucking it carefully into his coat pocket. As the servants dispersed, he bowed to one of the lady's maids, requesting a small favor. Might I borrow a soft brush? The sort a lady uses for face powder? Yes, the maid replied, fetching one while Finian waited. Brush in hand, he returned to his uncle's bookshop with the herbalism text, the map,
and his jar of pollen. He would attend the king's audience tomorrow.
By the next day, word of Finian's return had permeated the city. The audacious young man, previously unnoticed, was now a figure of intense curiosity. At the king's decree, Finian was granted the first position in line. As the majestic, carved double doors to the throne room swung open, he inhaled deeply, straightened his shoulders, and fought to quell the rising tide of doubt. He walked towards the king, seated with Princess Isolde beside him. The room felt unusually crowded. The entire court seemed assembled for this spectacle. Bowing low, Finian began. "Your Majesty, I have brought what I believe will cure your pain, but it requires no special shoe," he announced. The king regarded him skeptically. Finian continued, producing the jar and brush from his coat. "If you would permit me access to the shoe you currently wear, I shall demonstrate," he proposed. This was highly irregular, a commoner requesting to handle the king's footwear. Nevertheless, upon the king's assenting nod, a servant knelt and removed the silk shoe. Finian inclined his head respectfully, took the king's shoe, and carefully uncapped the jar. Using the borrowed brush, he lightly dusted the shoe's interior, mirroring the actions he'd witnessed the shoemaker perform that night beneath the bed. With the pollen applied, the decisive moment arrived. Finian returned the shoe to the servant, who gently eased it back onto the king's foot. Finian risked a glance at Isolde. Her eyes were wide, her breath held captive. The king stood. He flexed his ankle, took a step. He executed a light hop. Then, his face erupted in pure joy, and he began to dance, arms waving merrily above his head. The chamber instantly buzzed with the astonished chatter of 100 nobles, witnessing the most miraculous event in recent memory. But for Finian, only Isolde's reaction mattered. Shyly, he turned, meeting her gaze directly. To his profound relief, she returned his look with a smile. Though all focus remained on the jubilant king, these two knew in that shared glance that their own story had just begun. And so, King Valerius was restored to his former self. Realizing the shoe possessed no inherent magic, he commissioned an extravagant wardrobe of slippers in diverse colors, each ready to receive its dusting of potent pollen. Numerous parties and festivals filled the calendar that year, yet none surpassed the splendor of the wedding uniting Isolde and Finian. The pair became inseparable, often seen strolling the palace gardens even before their nuptials, lost in animated conversation. Together, they founded an extensive library within the palace, stocked naturally by Finian's delighted uncle. It featured many comfortable chairs, tall rolling ladders, and large atlases spread upon broad tables, After all, both Isolde and Finian felt they still had much reading ahead. The king rarely frequented the library, but his happiness had returned, mirroring that of the citizens in the glittering city by the river. With Isolde and Finian destined for the throne, the kingdom looked forward to a future blessed by continued merriment, prosperity, and sound judgment. The fragile leaves snap underfoot as you amble down the rural byway. Ahead, a sign beckons towards your destination. Ember Hollow Farm, carved into weathered timber, hung upon an old, time-bleached gate. Far in the hazy distance, timbered peaks wear a tapestry of russet and gold. Here, however, the land stretches flatter, perfectly suited for the cultivation of gourds. Above, a serene cerulean expanse is punctuated by drifts of cottony cloud. Glancing down, your eye catches a flawless maple leaf, shed by the crimson and gold behemoth arching overhead. You stoop, carefully pinching its stem. Held aloft against the sun's gentle luminescence, you marvel at its intricate venation. Unlike its brittle neighbors, this leaf remains supple, still holding the memory of moisture from its life aloft. Too exquisite to abandon, you think, carefully tucking it into your satchel as a memento. As you approach the gate, a soft current of air sighs past. You feel its coolness through the weave of your shirt, prompting you to draw your fine lamb's wool scarf a fraction tighter. The gate is secured with an aged iron latch. Sliding your thumb beneath, you lift it. It groans and shudders, testifying to decades spent guarding this farmstead. You ease the latch back down, securing the gate behind you. Turning, the heady perfume of mellow pumpkins and sharp, sweet apples greets your senses, a rich autumnal welcome. The pumpkin patch commences with a brief earthen track, flanked by lanky sentinel trees. Foliage in shades of ruby, ochre, umber, and flame are strewn upon the pale earth. Some surrender with a satisfying crunch beneath your shoes. Others, still soft, yield silently. You near a small wooden booth, the point of entry. A woman presides within, offering a welcoming nod. Amiable greetings are exchanged, a few pleasantries shared. You retrieve the necessary cash from your pocket, passing it across. She smiles, snaps open the tin cash box, and presents you with a cardstock token. You rub your fingertips across its surface, turning it over once before slipping it away. Past the booth, more of Ember Hollow Farm unfurls before you. From this vantage, cucurbits of myriad shapes and hues sprawl across the fields. Diminutive orange pie pumpkins and the spectral white ghost pumpkins immediately capture your attention. You admire the stark beauty of the white ones, their stout, dark stems like handles, their rinds gleaming. Bitter or sweet? You muse silently, pondering their taste. It's been some time since your last visit. You'd nearly forgotten the sheer variety, the boundless creativity of nature's autumnal bounty. Around you lie verdant globes, gourds freckled gold, and even multi-toned wonders. Your gaze wanders, taking in more than just pumpkins. It settles on a stark white barn, capped in black nearby, echoing the palette of the ghost pumpkins. Signs point towards a corn maze, an apple orchard, hayrides, and a bonfire. An especially inviting nook promises treats and warm beverages, a stop you mentally earmark for later. To your right, a generous map is mounted on a wooden signpost. You skim your fingertips over its surface, charting a course to the apple orchard, committing the general layout to an internal chart. You proceed towards the orchard, intent on finding the perfectly crisp, crimson apple. For a short while, you follow a smaller path, flanked by artfully painted gourds, seasonal adornments, and hefty bales of straw. Surveying the surroundings, you note the tranquil atmosphere. A few families and small groups dot the landscape, but it's pleasantly unhurried. A serene excursion is promised, a thought that brings a quiet contentment. Before long, you arrive at the orchard. It's quite compact, perhaps a dozen trees in all. Each one, however, is laden with swollen, ruby-bright apples amidst vibrant emerald leaves. Both fruit and foliage are scattered across the dun-colored grass beneath. A gentle breeze drifts through the boughs, and you feel the cool air kiss your skin. Though clad in cozy knitwear, the light wind finds the tiny interstices of the weave. Yet, beneath the soft autumn sun, cocooned in wool, you feel tremendously comfortable, enveloped in ease. Strolling slowly through the orchard rows, you witness a lustrous scarlet apple tumble from its perch just ahead, bouncing softly into a drift of leaves. Intrigued, you make your way towards it. Leaves rustle as your hand delves into the pile to retrieve the fallen fruit. It feels reassuringly solid in your palm as you rotate it, inspecting for flaws. But it is unblemished, sleek, and perfectly mature. This particular apple, it seems, was destined for your hand. Exiting the orchard along another shaded trail, you soon encounter a cluster of rustic signposts pointing in various directions. One declares candied apples with a decisive arrow. You had envisioned eating a plain, unadorned apple, but now your curiosity is piqued. Fruit in hand, you follow the sign's directive. After a minute or two, you arrive at the booth. The fruit stand offers freshly prepared candied and caramel apples, boasting diverse toppings, alongside the option to craft your own. Following a brief exchange with the unhurried grower working the stall, he hands you a sharpened wooden skewer. Taking it carefully, you impale the fruit through its base, aiming for the core. Once it feels securely mounted, you slowly submerge it into a basin of viscous amber caramel. The aroma of burnt sugar, darkly sweet, reaches you as the tacky, warm glaze enrobes the peel. A pleasant anticipation blooms at the thought of this special indulgence. As a final flourish, you roll the coated apple in a tumble of crushed nuts. Now it's complete, you decide. Offering thanks to the grower for his assistance, you turn away and head towards the main expanse of the patch. A pair of children, hands clasped, dart past, eager for their own turn with the caramel. Soon, you spy a wooden bench, an inviting spot for repose while you enjoy your creation. It groans softly under your weight as you sit, but feels comfortable beneath you. From here, a sweeping vista across the patch unfolds. A figure of straw, clad in rough spun overalls, stands sentinel, surrounded by hundreds of orange pumpkins, some grand, others diminutive. Glancing down at the caramel apple, you turn it slowly, admiring your handiwork. It gleams, mirroring the mellow afternoon sun and a single branch of the maple tree behind you. You lift it, carefully biting through the crisp shell into yielding sweetness. It delivers the remembered delight. You linger on the bench, admiring the dominion of gourds before you. The distant peaks meet an uneven horizon line formed by ripe orange pumpkins. From this perspective, it appears as though a tangle of sinuous and rigid stems pokes towards the skyline. The very air is perfumed with autumn. Hints of cinnamon and apple mingle with the earthy aromas of caramel and pumpkin spice, blending further with notes of fallen leaves, rich soil, and dry straw. Everything about this moment conspires to make you feel enveloped in warmth and ease. The urge to select a pumpkin to take home stirs, but you decide to wait. Carrying a weighty prize seems premature when there are still more wonders to uncover. For now, you simply contemplate the ideal choice. As you continue observing the patch, you watch families, couples, and individuals meander between the sprawling vines and dark soil. Some capture moments with cameras. Others hunt for the perfect orange squash. They bend low, inspecting various specimens, looks of playful inquiry dancing on their faces. Some visitors pull small red wagons where children ride, clutching cherished gourds. Others opt to carry their selections cradled in their arms. After a few more moments, you rise from the protesting bench and make your way onward towards the black and white barn noted earlier. It lies just beyond the orchard you've already explored. Instead of retracing your steps to the right, you select a path veering left. As the day matures, the breeze acquires a sharper breath. You fasten another button on your cardigan, securing yourself against the chill. Walking towards the barn, you notice a few corvids wheeling through the sky overhead, calling to one another. You look up at the cloud-strewn heavens, admiring how the lowering autumn sun begins its descent. After another left turn, you arrive at the charming barn situated centrally within the patch. It seems a natural hub for the farm staff, and visiting families alike. You see one grower leaning casually against the barn wall, conversing with another. Periodically, both sipe from wisping mugs held cupped in their palms. One man is dressed in loose overalls and a brown plaid shirt. The other wears blue jeans, a simple shirt tucked neatly at the waist. Both sport sturdy boots. Together, they converse with easy laughter, enjoying their warm drinks. The relaxing sound of foliage trembling in a nearby tree captures your attention. Turning, you look just in time to see several leaves detach, pirouetting together before settling softly on the grass. A few others are caught by the breeze and carried towards the barn, drawing your gaze along with them. Out of the corner of your eye, you notice a group of horses. They stand within a raw timber fence, cropping the grass peaceably. You watch them take measured mouthfuls, chewing with placid satisfaction. The sight brings a smile, and you spend a few minutes admiring them from a respectful distance. One horse is a deep umber hue, its mane a perfect match. The other is tawny gold with a flaxen mane. A zephyr lifts their silken manes momentarily. The horses shake their heads, clearing their vision before returning their focus to the grass. Noble, powerful beasts, you reflect. Just then, a farmhand emerges from the rear of the barn. She begins grooming the umber horse, which seems to welcome the focused attention. Deciding it's time to move on, you leave the horses to their grooming and grazing. All around, the pumpkin patch hums with gentle life. You spot a tractor-drawn flatbed laden with hay bales. Families gather one by one for a ride around the farm. You recognize these rides as a cherished farm tradition and briefly consider joining, imagining the crisp October air rushing past as you jostled and swayed around the property. But you decide to cede the experience to the groups currently waiting. As families fill the wagon and depart, you find yourself in welcome solitude near the barn. The place is almost entirely yours. It's profoundly calm. Small wonder your spirit settles into tranquility here. A faint crackle carries on the air from the opposite side of the barn. Recalling the map, you realize that must be the direction of the fire circle. You walk towards it, noticing a tendril of smoke ascending as the crackling grows louder. You arrive at a circle formed of cut logs, a modest bonfire radiating warmth from amongst rocks in its center. The comforting scent of wood smoke is deeply soothing. There aren't many things more quintessentially autumnal than a bonfire, you muse. The entrance to this section of the farm is marked by a rustic timber archway, decorated with brittle corn husks. 2 hay bales flank the entrance, topped with a pleasing array of gourds. You pass through the archway, admiring the careful curation evident throughout the patch. Strings of tiny lights are suspended overhead, forming a glimmering canopy above the fire circle. Beneath them, robust bales and timber rounds offer seating. Over to your right is a sheltered stall where vendors serve treats and warm drinks. the temperature is noticeably cooler as evening approaches, and you decide a hot beverage would be perfect. You happily walk over to the covered area where the fragrance of warm spice fills the air. You can still hear the persistent crackle of the nearby fire, setting an idyllic mood. The menu is handwritten, chalked onto a slate hung from a wooden pillar. Taking a moment to read, you see offerings of pumpkin spice hot chocolate, warm apple cider, and coffee. After brief deliberation, you choose the pumpkin spice hot chocolate. You are at a pumpkin patch. After all, the blend is homemade according to the sign, and besides, the rich blend of cocoa and spice already seems to be beckoning. The vendor offers a warm smile as he hands you your drink. It's served in a forest green earthenware mug, adorned with miniature pumpkins. You settle the cost with thanks before waving goodbye. Turning, you glance back at the inviting blaze. You wish you could conjure one just like it in your own backyard. You imagine toasting marshmallows over the flames, watching them achieve a caramelized exterior before biting into the molten core, savoring the gooey texture and sweet flavor. You'd gather friends, especially at this time of year, for spectral tales. You'd sit by the fire, sharing narratives, staying warm with hot cider and tea. The lengthening evenings would shrink in good company. You cross the grass and take a seat on one of the hay bales. Running your palm across it, you feel the coarse, desiccated texture against your skin. You catch its faintly dusty perfume between undertones of the warm chocolate you hold. You inhale deeply, a wave of calm washing over you. Bringing the mug closer, you inhale its heady fragrance more deeply. Then you lower the cup and take a substantial draught of the comfortingly hot drink. It infuses you with warmth from the inside out. Closing your eyes, you take a moment to focus purely on your senses. You hear the rustling of leaves in the maples and birches around you, the steady crackle of the fire beside you. The scents of autumn surround you. You feel utterly serene, immersed in the quintessence of the season. As the light begins to ebb and dusk gently descends, the tiny lights intensify their glow, and the fire's heat feels more profound. It has been a beautiful day. Now you sit and sip your hot chocolate, savoring the season's chill, the fire's embrace, and the wind's soft song. Later, you will select the ideal gourd to take home. Who knows? Perhaps you will create that fire pit in your own yard this season after all. Maybe you will invite friends for warm pies and shared tales. It need not remain mere fancy, you think to yourself, as the essence of this haven permeates your being. You cup the warm earthenware with both hands, feeling centered and snug. You sit and offer silent gratitude to the earth for the splendor of the waning year and this perfect interlude spent here at Ember Hollow Farm.